Dionysius was born here in Athens. As a bright boy, he was given a classical Greek education. After that, he went off to Egypt to continue that education. He ended up in a place called Areopagus, which was a city near Cairo. It was there that he witnessed the total eclipse that happened the night Jesus was crucified in 33 AD. He was scared by this and wondered what it could possibly mean. Athens in that day was a walled city, about 1.5 miles from east to west and a little less north to south. The gates to the city are still standing in some places. This arch was built 80 years after Paul and Dionysius walked these roads. There was about 20,000 people crammed into the city. It had a good number that lived outside the walls too, kind of like the suburbs. But that was nothing compared to other cities at the time. Corinth, just about 50 miles down the road, had almost 100,000 people in that region. Paul went there after Athens. Dionysius was a brilliant man who had everything going for him. Athens was still the intellectual center of the world. It wasn't like a New York City or London anymore, but it was more like Berkeley or Boston. The world's greatest minds came there to study and to teach. They wanted to walk in the footsteps of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. Dionysius was in that mold. He was bright, he was powerful, but he was also conflicted. He was conflicted over this eclipse and what it meant. He was conflicted because none of what the philosopher said completely satisfied him. His whole life he had been truly spiritual, an Athenian, and so much of his life he had been searching for the truth. And then this guy Paul approaches him, and he's curious. Dionysius, his friends and his colleagues, they called Paul a spermologos, a seed picker. They said he was like a bird that picked a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and he tried to throw all these ideas together. A lot of his friends even misunderstood Paul's teaching. When Paul mentions Jesus and anastasis, the Greek word for resurrection, they think he's talking about a foreign god and his girlfriend, Anastasia. But Dionysius, searching for wisdom, gives him a fair hearing. I'm sure that even he would be shocked to know that today there's a street named in his honor here in Athens, a street walked by millions of tourists every year on their way to visit the Parthenon. These two intellectual giants, Paul and Dionysius, had their first meeting of the minds right here in the year 51 AD. We're about 200 meters from the Parthenon, just up there. Paul came to Athens because he was kicked out of Berea, another ancient city. It's up by Thessaloniki, about 300 miles away. He would have come by boat, escorted by some folks that were sympathetic to his message. And even if Paul never planned to go to Athens, he must have been excited to be here. In a sense, he had been preparing for this his entire life. Athens had to have been up there on his list of top cities to visit. He knew the history. He knew that ideas take root in the city and spread to the countryside. So Paul starts thinking, okay, I'm here. It's the intellectual capital of the world. I'm gonna be here for a few months. Here's what I'm gonna do. And he spent his Saturdays going to the synagogue, talking with his Jewish brothers and other God-fearing people. And he spent the rest of the week talking, discussing, and arguing with whoever was in the marketplace. Paul and Dionysius are alike in that they began their education at home, but they're sent away to these elite institutions to finish their education. Paul went to Jerusalem and sat at the feet of Gamaliel, but Tarsus, where he was born, was a philosophical hub. 3 well-known Stoic philosophers were from Tarsus. What a perfect background Paul has. He's equipped. He knows how to engage these Athenians of all different backgrounds. He can talk with the religious people who might be trusting in their traditions. And he can also say to a guy like Dionysius, you know that God that you've been searching for your whole life? Here he is. His name is Jesus Christ. And Paul does exactly that. He tells Dionysius and the other members of the Areopagus, the Supreme Court, this incredible message. The God who you think cannot be known has come to us in Jesus Christ. But he doesn't start there. He doesn't jump to the Messiah like you would in the synagogue. He meets them exactly where they're at. He looks at their culture, their desires, their longings. He quotes their poets and their artists. Paul told them that they were very spiritual. People were searching. They were questing for truth, just like we are today. He can also tell that they're spiritual because there's so many false gods and temples packed into this city. Petronius, a poet of that time, said, "It's easier to meet a god than a man in Athens." He was saying that there was more false gods than even people here.